Well, we have the war of words between Absolute Black, Hambini and Peak Talk. And I have weighed in on it on a couple of comments on some YouTubes that have been put out. So what is all this about? It's about their oversized pulley wheel and the claims that Absolute Black are making. So let's roll that intro and let's get into it and what's been really going on and why there's controversy. Now, before we jump into Absolute Black's opinion, Hambini's opinion, Peak Talk's opinion, my opinion, everyone else's opinion, in the engineering and medical industry, we have checks and balances to be able to ensure that when we're engineering things and research that's been done stands up on its merits. So if you build a bridge or you build a plane or if you release a new drug or whatever, there's been studies and proper peer reviews done on those studies to make sure that the research has been done correctly and the claims are above board. Now, when it comes to the bicycle industry, we very rarely see this, if ever, because it's a really kind of unregulated industry. I mean, you can go down your back shed and you can knock up some frames for a bicycle and you can sell them. There's no real checks and balances about a bicycle because it's a very low speed vehicle. Your chances of death from a bicycle are pretty low from failure. So it's really not regulated as well as some of the other industries like the automotive industry and the aeroplane industry and, you know, mechanical engineering as far as bridges and buildings and all that sort of thing goes. So the way the system works is that first of all, if you were doing a study on something, and this could be the losses associated with oversized bearings, then what you would do is you would write your mathematical or chemical statement in your report. So you basically explain why this is the case using, you know, industry standard beliefs, you know, mathematics, and you actually prove by doing those calculations that this is actually possible. And then what you would do is after you've done that theoretical study, then you would actually have to do some practical studies. So what you would do is you would do some testing associated with proving the theoretical theory that you have and putting it into practice. Now, when you do a study in the real world, it's like checking, you know, medical vaccines or such, or even proving that something is actually going to work. Like you know, if a bridge is going, you're going to build a bridge and you've got this new technique for building it, then you would actually build a model of the bridge and you would show that it's going to work. Now, one of the main things when you actually do a study is the controls. Now, controls are all the things that could potentially affect the test. So if we had an oversized pulley, we may say the top of chain may affect the losses, the lubricant may affect the losses, the angle at which the derailleur is set at could affect the losses, what gear it's in could affect the losses. So all of these things you would need to do some different testing in with different components and see if you have any significant variation. And if you do, you would do some modeling to support that with your final test, and you would actually claim some sort of variation to your results. So all these things would be done. Then once you've actually done all this stuff and you've completed your report or your thesis, then you would get it peer reviewed. Now, peer review would be done by someone who is also an expert in this industry, and he may pick up some controls that you missed and may ask you to go back and do the testing, or might say, yeah, you did a great job, and I believe that what you're saying there is pretty accurate. Now, in this case here, I've put out the challenge to Absolute Black and said, hey, look guys, if you can show that you've put out a peer-reviewed paper for the losses of these oversized pulleys, and you've also had an independent test. Now, the independent test I did suggest it could be Hambini, it could be Peak Talk, but they may believe that they're biased, or they could use an independent lab which uses international standards to do its testing, so they know about how this whole system works when you do a test on a product. Now, I said to them in a comment, I said on GC Performance's comment, if you can prove that and use the system that we use in the engineering industry and the medical industry to substantiate claims, then I will apologise. I'll make a video, I will apologise to Absolute Black, and I'll also do an independent video promoting their product because they've shown to me that their claims are accurate. Now this whole tit for tat thing is a bit amusing because we all know Hambini, if you've been watching him for some time, he likes to make a big joke of all these things, and he likes to wave his little finger at these companies. But to be on a more serious note, in conclusion, these are my reasons why I don't believe, or I have doubt, that these oversized pulley wheels are really going to give you any efficiency in your drive terrain. Now, the first thing we need to understand is those pulleys are on the non-load side of the chain. Okay, so all they're doing is just feeding the chain back to the cassette, and the cassette has the chain locked. So there's no load on those pulley wheels. They're just basically taking up the slack via a spring on the jockeys to take up the slack of the chain as you change gears. So any loading that you may associate with bearings and how efficient they are is really mute. Right, the second point is that when you have bigger wheels on the back, the chain then has to go through a much more tortuous path, which means that it has to go round the wheel further, so the point away from the center of that circle is bigger, and also on the other pulley wheel. So the chain has to go through through a more tortuous path. Now, if it's going through a more tortuous path, the links on the chain have to move more, which is going to create more drag. Now, you could argue this is small, but it's still there. It's still more than it is with a standard jockey wheel system. Now, 3, we also have the bearings. Now, the bigger you make the bearing, with all these small bearings in it, you have a lot more contact surface. You actually have a bigger cage, a cage that has more contact points in the bearing, so therefore you're going to have more drag in the bearing. And 4th, they're saying that they're all ceramic. The bearings and the surfaces are all ceramic, but obviously the cage isn't, but the balls and the surfaces are all ceramic. Now, if anyone's ridden their bike and watched their derailleur when they change gear, there's actually quite a lot of shock put onto that derailleur. And I know when I'm riding mine, I can see it. It really is quite significant. You can feel it sort of almost like a shock for your feet. So there's quite a sharp force, and ceramics don't like sharp forces. So whether they get pitted or not over time is another argument to be put forward. Right? Now, 5, if you just get a chain and you disconnect it from the chain rings and the cassette, even on a Shimano Campagnolo SRAM derailleur, the chain almost falls through the jockey wheels, right? It's just under its own weight. You know, if you've got good bearings in there, the chain will just fall, it'll just fall out. If you have your bike on a bike stand and you allow the chain to drop on the floor, it'll just fall out of those jockey wheels. So the resistance, even with a standard system, is really small. Now, when you're trying to get a better efficiency of something that's very small, it's a very small amount of a very small amount, and of course that really adds up to pretty much nothing in the whole scheme of the transmission. So if they're claiming something like 3 watts or more, which I believe they are, that's quite a huge amount. So this is where I throw down the gauntlet to Absolute Black. Let's see this all been proven through the normal engineering and medical industry parameters, where we have your scientist that you claim is in your lab, who's got a doctorate in this, get him to put out a paper, get it peer reviewed, and let's have some independent testing done, either by a lab that it works to international standards, and there's many of these around the world, and they're all recognised, or you can give it to Hambini or Pete Talk, and they can do some independent tests. But I do know that you've had some clash with them, and you may not want to do that. So there are your options. If you can show me that what you're saying is correct through the normal checks and balances that we have in the industry, I will apologise on my channel, and also I will do a whole video dedicated to your product and promoting the product and saying how good it is, because you've shown me that what you're saying is correct. But until that point in time, I'm still going to say I don't believe it's going to give you any better transmission efficiency than if you have a normal OEM jockey wheels on it. That's where I'm going to leave it, guys. Catch you next vid. Cheers.